I've got a lot of things to talk about, and I'm sure people have questions. So I want to.
I'll go then. I'll let you.
You're gonna go. I think your story of. I think a lot of people assume that entrepreneurs are engineers. They live in Silicon Valley. They're born in Silicon Valley. But you have a story where you were making book jackets, and then you created one of the most iconic companies in the world. So something happened in between those things. So maybe just a real brief, how did you get in the tech world? What was the story?
It was accidental. I actually grew up, my sisters and I with my mom, and we were very poor. But we grew up in an affluent town, so that was great. And so we went to great schools. And so skip forward, I got some scholarships to university, and I was at university, and I got a job moving some heavy boxes from the lobby to the attic of this publishing company. And one day when the art department went out to lunch, this was when they just had switched over from old school tech like stat machines and X-Acto knives and spray glue and everything. They just switched over to desktop publishing, which I had learned in school and was a really big fan of, like trying to figure out how to make art, on the Mac. And they all went out to lunch, so I found a copy of the transmittal. It's like a piece of paper. What is the book cover supposed to look like, etc. So I sat in the art director's chair and I designed a cover and I printed it out. I matted it up and I slipped it in with the others to go off for approval in New York City, where the editorial and sales would approve it. And when they got back, the art director was like, "Who did this one?" And I was like, "Oh, that was me." And he's like, "The box kid?" And so then he offered me a job. And I was like, well, everyone here has an MFA. What am I going to school for? Didn't they all go to school to get these jobs? So I said, yeah, sure, great. And I basically apprenticed with him, designing book jackets for 2 or 3 years. And I loved it. It was super fun, really great. And but then I had an idea like, well, I could do more than this. I could have my own studio, and I could design all kinds of things. So I broke off on my own, and then quickly realized, like, oh, I need to find work. Like, they don't just give you what, So I was bumbling around for a couple months, and then some guy came up to me and said, hey, listen, my boss says we need a website. Do you do websites? And he said, we have a $5,000 budget. And I was like, yes, I do. Absolutely. No clue how to do it. So, but I was like, $5,000? You crazy? Like, so I went out and I got a book. It was called The Visual Quick Start Guide to HTML. And I put together a pretty bad website. But he didn't care. He was just like, all right, check the box. Right. And then my friends who did graduate college and went into consulting, and then they were like, we're smart. Why are we telling other people how to run their businesses? We should start. Biz, you're the web guy. Let's start a web company. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm the web guy. So we founded a company in 1999, which was a very early social network, basically.
Right, called Zynga.
Yeah, and then because I did that, well, I ended up quitting that job because, not because I didn't love working on it, but because I was kind of outvoted by my two friends. First of all, I wanted to start it in Boston and hire engineers at MIT. They were like, no, New York City's cooler. So we went there, and then they started hiring all their friends from consulting. Yeah. And I was like, what do we need these guys for? We need more engineers. But what do these guys just go on their phones all day? What are they doing? Right. Anyway, so I quit. And then I was really sorry that I quit. But fortunately, Google invited me to come work for them.
And that's where you met Evan.
That's where I met Evan Williams. And the thing is, once you work at Google early, everyone automatically assumes you're some kind of genius, which I wasn't. It's a miracle that I even got to work at Google in the first place. It was kind of a fluke thing, but
although your blog
that got me started. Yeah.
When I met you, your blog was called. Do you want to admit it?
Yeah. It was called. I had a blog called Bizem Stonem, Genius. And I pretended that I owned a company called Genius Labs, and I had this sort of alternate persona, because really I was for a lot of the time I was working out of my mom's basement, and I had no money, and my credit cards were all maxed out, but I was pretending that I was running this big company. Today we're working on hybrid airship technology. It's going to be the future, and all this stuff. And I think some people believed me. I thought it was obviously a joke. But
it's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to shift a little bit. I think everybody in this room has heard of Twitter, but the story of how Twitter started may not be known to many or most people here. Was it an immediate success?
No. I mean, we didn't even start it as Twitter.
Right.
So Evan Williams and I, we worked together at Google on Blogger, because we were both bloggers. And we were driving home one day, and the iPods had just come out. And I thought, I was just sort of thinking out loud, and I thought, wait a minute, if you, since you can record in the browser in Flash, couldn't we let people record whatever they wanted to and then just write a little something to sync those recordings with iPods and basically do what blogging did for writing, but we could do it for audio. So like anyone could basically have like a radio station kind of. And he was like, ooh, that's a good idea. So that turned out to be called podcasting, but like, you know, that was 2005.
Right.
And we thought everyone had iPods, but it was really just like our nerdy friends that had iPods. So we tried to do it, and it just, I think the biggest thing that went wrong was we weren't into podcasting. It was a good idea, but neither
But the founders didn't love it.
neither one of us recorded podcasts or listened to podcasts. And I remember like we were only about a year in, or less than a year in, and I went out to dinner with Evan, and I said, you know what? Even if we're really successful at this, is that what you want to be, like the king of podcasting? And he was like, oh, no, I don't want. I'm not interested in this. And I was like, well, we got to figure something else out. So long story short, we had hired a guy called Jack Dorsey, and he and I became really good friends. He was easy to make laugh. And so we liked each other a lot. We found excuses to work on little projects together. And so Evan, who was the CEO of Odeo, which was the podcasting company, he said, why doesn't everyone just pair up and work on something else, and I'll try to see if I can sell Odeo, and we'll see what happens. And so Jack and I paired up and created Twitter. And I remember we had like 1 or 2 weeks to build something and then show the rest of the team. And what we were really excited about was making text messages or SMS work with the web and vice versa, because no one had done anything like that. And so we were just interested in seeing like, oh, can you like say what you're doing on text message and it'll show up on a website, and can you type it into a web form and it'll send out to people's phones. So we didn't even get it working. I mocked up a fake version of it, and we showed it to the team, and everyone was like, and what else does it do? We're like, you type in what you're doing, and then it goes out to people who care. And they were like, no, pass. You know, like nobody wanted to do it. And so everyone thought it was stupid, except Ev was like, you guys seem really into this. Why don't you keep working on it? So I think what ended up happening was our enthusiasm was contagious.
Because you loved it.
I loved it. And that's when I learned a lesson that, like, you have to be emotionally invested in what you're doing. It can't just be a good idea. Because if I wasn't super interested in Twitter when we started building it,
yeah,
I would have totally quit. Because everyone said how stupid it was.
Yeah.
Like, people were signing up just to say this is a stupid thing. Which made me think like, ooh, people might like this because they want to express themselves.
Right.
But even like, I designed the whole site, and I put everything together, and I had a rotating testimonials on the front page of what people said about it. And some popular blogger at the time had said, Twitter is like Seinfeld. It's a website about nothing. And I was like, oh wow, Seinfeld's a hit show. Let's put that on there. And everyone was like, Biz, I don't think he's complimenting you. I was like, yes, you're crazy. Seinfeld, huge show. And that's how like distorted my reality was. I was so emotionally invested in it. I even put my phone number on the front page of the website. Like, if you have any problems, call me.
Yeah.
Which turned out later to be a bad idea. But at first, it was good. Anyway, it's just we were so interested in it, you know?
Yeah, I think the other thing, I have a lot to talk about, but one more Twitter thing. One thing I always felt was true in the early days of Twitter was the brand was always bigger than the user base.
Yeah.
You know, it was
It's
tiny
still
for a
true.
long time.
Still true.
And I think it was unusual. I mean, you guys were on Oprah before the site was even that big, and so what was the reason
Or
that
the
people
team.
cared?
We had like
Yeah.
15 people, and
Right.
everyone thought we must have
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of people.
So why do you think the brand was so far ahead of the user base? And you know, what was the, you know,
Well, there was, I think, in the
attraction to the brand?
In the very beginning, and this is mostly because I love doing it. I spent a lot of time being way overly communicative with, first of all the users. I sent out a weekly email saying, here's what we did. Here's something that broke. Here's how we fixed it. I also had a public-facing blog that I was constantly writing to. I would say so and so got married, so and so had a baby, and here's what's going on with this and that. And it created like a real connection between everyone who used it and everyone who worked on it, to the point where we became infamous for whenever there was going to be a big event, and people knew that people were going to tweet a lot. They knew that we might break. We did a terrible job at the technology. So, and so one night there was going to be a Macworld conference the next day, and we were at the office late, and a pizza came in, and I was like, "Hey guys, whoever ordered the pizza, it's here," and like nobody looked up, and then another pizza came, and then like 3 more pizzas, and then a keg of beer. And I was like, who's ordering all this stuff? And it turns out that it was people who used Twitter knew we were probably staying up late, and they were sending it in to us.
Yeah, they cared.
So I think we formed a real bond with the people who used Twitter at first. And that kept them with us, even though we kind of weren't very good. Like, we were breaking all the time, and there were people coming out with better versions of the same thing, and they're like, no, we like these poor guys. But then I think what happened was influential people started to join. And it was a shock to me, because I thought celebrities will never want to use this, because the whole point of being a celebrity is you have limited access. That's what makes you a celebrity. But they were like, no, this is great. I can talk directly to my fans. I don't have to go through a PR agency. I don't have to do anything. And then politicians, world leaders, influential people. So every time there was something in the news, Twitter was mentioned along with this big event in the news, like as if we had something to do with it. We had nothing to do with it. To the point where, like, Arab Spring comes along, and every important news organization in the world wants me to come on and talk about it.
Right.
And I had to figure out a polite way of saying no to that, because who am I to go on there and talk about this? People are like dying in the streets and giving up their lives, and I'm going to go on there and be like, yeah, sign up. Right. It's crazy.
Right.
So I did figure out a diplomatic way of saying no, but I think that's one of the reasons why it just the brand had such this big awareness. And really, in fact, we started in the URL field. You could see like what a person's user number was, and at one point our engineers decided to start counting by tens. Yeah. So nerds who would look up there would be like, oh my God, they're growing so fast, and really we're just counting by tens.
It's great. I have so many questions for you, but I'm wondering. Let me keep going, and then maybe we could take some other questions from other folks. I think one thing that I hear from entrepreneurs a lot is, what are the keys to starting a company? Do you need business training? Do you need to have a formalized engineering degree? Your background. And, first of all, you have success as an entrepreneur, but you've also invested in the early days of other amazing companies. Do you have any kind of advice or observation on how to think about some of these questions of what does it take?
Well, I mean, I think for some people, you do need people who have training in certain things. Like,
book jackets.
No, but I think I think the answer is no. You don't have to have a training to start a company. But what you do need is a ton of enthusiasm, hallucinogenic optimism. The feeling that like, no matter what, we're going to figure something out. I just really want to work on this. We'll figure out any problems that come down the road. But you also have to work with people that you really admire. You can't wait to get into work with them. You should be. I always say that if you're not laughing once a day with them, then something's going wrong. You know, you should have a good rapport, laughing, having fun, loving what you're doing. I often tell young people, like, don't set out to try to make a lot of money.
Right.
Because if you do that, first of all, you probably won't. Or if you do, you won't be happy. The better thing to do is find something that you just really love working on with people that you really like being around. And then you're more likely to end up stumbling into some money. But even if you don't, you're going to love what you're doing. So it's like win-win. But I don't think you need formal training to have an idea and then start executing on the idea and then finding people whatever you don't know. If you're if you're enthusiastic enough, and people will join you.
Right.
People who know what they're doing.
You know, recruiting is also a recurring theme I hear in the Czech Republic. You know, it's hard to hire people. The unemployment rate's low. Labor market's tight. You know, I know you have a lot of experience with company culture, and you know, perhaps you can just share a few thoughts on these types of things.
Well, the biggest thing I think for retaining talent is your company culture. And I always say that a company culture, I mean, it's like emergence. It will happen whether or not you pay attention to it. You might get lucky and have a great culture without trying, but it's unlikely. So you really have to tend to it like you would a product manager tending to a product. You have to make sure you focus on your culture. What do we want? What do we don't? And I think the best way to do that is to articulate the purpose of the company, ideally as early as possible. If it's later, it's fine. Google, when I joined Google, they had organized the world's information and make it universally accessible. And that was great because it attracted a certain type of like super nerd who wanted to work on this forever. And mind you, like a purpose statement, this is semantic, but a mission is either completed or failed, but a purpose is enduring. So when you come up with a purpose statement, you come up with something that's never going to be done. So organizing the world's information, there's always going to be more information. We're always discovering new things. And so having a purpose keeps your whole team kind of like, oh, I know what we're doing. You know, there's that apocryphal story of JFK during the space race, visiting NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, and introducing himself to everyone there. And he goes over to the guy with the mop and the bucket, and he says, hi, I'm John F. Kennedy. What do you do here? And the guy said, I'm helping to put a man on the moon. And I love that story because it's like, it kind of gives me chills thinking about that. They did such a good job getting everyone on the same page. Like, we're here to put a man on the moon. That even the guy cleaning the toilets felt like, well, if I don't clean the toilets, the engineers aren't going to have a good go. And if they don't have a good go, they might have a bad day. We might not get there.
Right.
So to me, articulating a purpose statement is sort of the first step towards starting to build a company culture. And then also having a company culture, like what we did at Twitter. So the purpose statement I articulated for Twitter was to serve the public conversation. But I also did other things in the very early days of Twitter. I made fun of Google for Google had a sort of informal, I don't know what you call it, but an internal informal saying of don't be evil. And I always thought it was funny, like, why do they start with a negative?
Right.
Like, we could be terrible. We could be really bad. We could be mean. But just don't be, like, evil. And it's also very subjective, like, what does it even mean? Why don't you say be good and then go up from there? So that's what we did. And we started, like, you know, we had volunteer days and all those other things, which were big bonding experiences. Like, having the whole company do a volunteer day together is great. You get to work next to the CEO or whoever, you know, feeding people or, you know, digging up invasive plants or whatever, and it's like good work. You know, it's good bonding time. So I
remember those days.
I mean, the short version of it is you end up loving the people that you work with. And that's why you stay at a job. Yeah. You don't stay at a job because you might get a bonus or you have a good parking spot. You stay there because you wake up and you're like, oh, I get to be with those people today.
Yeah.
And that's what you really want.
Great. I want to switch to another topic, but maybe just we could go to Todd if you have a question from the audience.
I apologize. There we go. It said social media facilitated conversations for societies, but now perhaps they're broken, and referring to Twitter, Facebook, it doesn't matter. And your thoughts, can social media reclaim a positive role in societal debates?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I think that statement is spot on, where it started from a really good place, and it was working. And then it took a dangerous turn, and that's mostly because, well, it's a bunch of things. I think those of us who kind of created social media never thought of even the possibility. We barely thought of spam, let alone like, you know, state-organized disinformation campaigns and things like this. Like, we didn't even think of them. And by 2016, we were like, what is going on here? How do we fix this? And I think the beginning of the fix, and this maybe this will be talked about later today, but when I was asked to come back to Twitter in 2017, and it was a mess. I mean, it was just like, morale was terrible. We were losing good people. We were losing users. No matter what you want, it was all going down. And I remember, because when I had left and just become an advisor, I had originally said, look, we're more like AT&T. We make the telephone poles and the wires and the phones, but what people say over those things is not our problem. It's not our responsibility. We can't possibly read 1 billion tweets a day and decide which ones are offensive or dangerous or whatever. So it's not our problem. And when I went back, a lot of people had me as like a guest speaker in their group because the company had gotten really big. And they asked me, what's the biggest thing that's changed since you went and came back? And they were hoping for like some novel answer or some funny thing. And I said, it's actually that you guys haven't changed anything. It's kind of embarrassing and bad. And I said, you got to do something about this. We got to start cleaning up the whole service. I mean, even if you just think of it from a business perspective, you can't have all these white nationalists on here. It's going to drive away like thousands of wonderful, great conversations. So I said, think of something, anything. And the first answer turned out to be machine learning. Just looking, not reading the contents of any of these tweets, but looking at the user behavior. So a dumb example would be, oh, this account was created an hour ago, and it's already mentioned Bijan, 1,000 times. It's clearly harassment. We can just push this down. And that was like an immediate 60% of accounts were starting to get cleaned up. There was still so much room for improvement with subjectivity, and even to this day, there's still tough calls to make, which is unfortunate. Yeah. But, the hopeful answer is that newer technologies will help us at scale address these things and hopefully get back to a place where the conversation is productive. I would love for everyone to be arguing every day, but in a productive way that moves us forward. Yeah. The other thing is we didn't design the incentives right. When I was designing the site, I said, we don't know that much about anybody because we're not really asking them anything. So I'll just put up here that they have this many followers. And when you put a number on something, everyone wants to make it go up, like it's a video game. And, that's not a great incentive. The incentive should have been like, number of engaging conversations that have moved society forward. But how do you do that? Right. Anyway, I think there's hope for it if as long as people continue to work on it.
Are you still a hallucinogenic optimist?
Yeah. I unfortunately am. I usually am like, oh my God, look at this new thing. Imagine all this cool stuff we could do with it. Yeah. Whereas other people might be like, oh my God, this is so dangerous.
Let me ask you another question on just shifting gears a little bit. I think people know you obviously for your innovation in social media and your all your activity in working with incredible consumer internet companies. But you also have a passion for sustainability, food, sustainable food, and what's driving you there? What's the motivation? You've been involved in Beyond for a long time. So what is what's compelling for you?
Yeah, I invested in this company called Beyond Meat in like 2010 or 11, and they invited me to join the board.
Maybe just a quick what it is.
So Beyond Meat is plant-based meat protein. It's designed to mimic animal protein at the molecular level. using just a handful of plants like peas and fava beans, beets for color, you know. I mean, the real idea behind the company is just to, you know, the beauty of it is that you can sort of pick your cause. If you care about the environment, it's a massive environmental savings compared to having to grow cattle and feed them over time, and the amount of water and land use and all this stuff, or animal welfare, or human health. I mean, you know, there's obviously no cholesterol in a plant-based product like this. And, the American Cancer Society has decided to put their stamp of approval on this product. It's just, I mean, and then sustainability-wise, you know, if 5% of China decided that they wanted to eat like Americans, it's not mathematically possible. There's not enough land to even do it. So new ways of figuring this out have to be invented. And there's a bunch of cool tech here. There's not just like, there's plant-based, but there's also cell-based. You can take one cell of a chicken and you can grow chicken meat in a vat. I just think it's first of all, it's fascinating, and it's really fun to be involved. It's a new thing for me to learn about, consumer packaged goods, and it's fascinating to me. I like, part of me, one of my things, if I ever get out of tech, is to get into like vertical farming or something, because it's really cool and sustainable, and there's actually a lot of tech in it.
Yeah. You know, question, Todd? Do you have another one from the audience?
We do actually. You had mentioned a little bit about the climate at a company, and one question is, how do you maintain a company's culture and vision during periods of rapid growth or periods of rapid change? What do you think?
Well, normally what I've seen is, so you're small and you kind of, if you're ahead of the curve, you have a purpose statement and you've like sort of laid out to your team what you care about, maybe some values. And then I think what happens is the people who join early become ambassadors of that culture. It's almost like an internal brand, you know. And so then more people join and they find out, oh, this is how we do it. Oh, I see this volunteer day, or like every Friday everyone gets together and mixes up and has some beer and talks about what they work, and they talk to people that they don't normally work with. And so as you grow, people learn, oh, this is how we do it. Even through an orientation or whatever, but mostly through, you know, you come in and then your manager is behaving a certain way, so you start to behave that way. Right. I mean, you see the same thing in toxic environments. Oh, okay, we never take vacation. I guess I'll never take vacation. Like my manager never takes vacation. Oh, my manager yells at people. I'll yell at the people below me.
Right.
So it's just the opposite. I think as long as those early people get it, then it just multiplies.
Right. Yeah, I've seen this movie before as well in both directions.
You must have seen it in all kinds,
You know, another area I know it's important to you, ever since I met you, is your commitment to philanthropy and these kinds of things. This area I know is something that you've been really dedicated in. I mean, what's your approach to philanthropy? How do you decide when to get involved and when not to get involved? You know, do you have any kind of approach to this that you feel like you could share?
Well, it started out with just, when we didn't have any money, but we would do volunteer work. And I always recommend that to young people too. It's just like, I mean, it's almost kind of selfish in a way. I mean,
how so?
It seems like you're being selfless, but you can kind of be selfish because let's say you're looking for a job and you're not finding one, and you know, you go in job interview after job interview and people are like, you can kind of tell you're desperate. But if you start volunteering, you're busy. You're busy, and it's networking. You might be volunteering next to me, whoever, you don't know. And they might be hiring. But also, you feel good. You feel really good about yourself. And there's a real sense of achievement, because especially if you volunteer with a big group of people, you get, and you're volunteering for this person who's like, oh, I got to do this whole thing, and so it'll take me all summer. And then your group comes in and does the whole thing.
Right.
And they're like, oh my God, you just did all my work. or you go in and you make sandwiches for like 5,000 people, and it's like, oh my God. And so it feels really good, and it doesn't cost you anything. And then, you know, later on, when we started to have some means, you know, but what I do tell people is that there's compound interest in altruism. So rather than waiting till you feel like you're comfortable, which, by the way, a lot of people, you know, that's a moving target. They're like, well, not quite, not just right. When we have a slightly bigger house, maybe, oh no, a little bit. But even if you just give a little bit, because over 40 years, you will have done a lot more than if you wait until you're 50 and then write a check. Right. And you'll feel so much better, and so what we do is we figure out what could we be most, how could we be most useful, and sometimes that just means getting out of the way. And a lot of times for us it's been the most needed but the least sexy thing. Like nobody wants to sponsor this because like it's not cool. But we really need it, or the kids can't do this or that or the other thing. I remember early on when we first started with donating money, everyone wanted to like, oh, we want to send all the underprivileged kids to the ballet. And it was like, that's great, but who's going to pay for the buses?
Right.
Nobody wanted to pay for the buses.
Yep. So they got to get there.
They can't go unless someone pays for the buses.
Right.
Anyway.
Good. One more question I've got for you, but is there another one, Todd, that we can take from the audience as well?
There are a lot of people that would like to know what your current role is with Twitter these days.
0. I have nothing to do with Twitter at all.
Anything else you want to say about that?
Well, I saw what was coming, and I got out.
Yeah. It's a very different company now, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I don't even know. I mean, I left before there was a change. I sold everything I owned in it, and I have nothing to do with it at all.
Yeah. How do you feel? I mean, does it make you sad? Do you have any kind of observations given what you're seeing from afar?
Yeah, I mean, when I came back to work there in 2017, I was asked to come back to fix morale, turn things around, get the policy back on, get some real policy in there. We did all that, and now that's all just been like thrown out the window. So that's disappointing, but I don't know. Part of me hopes that this crazy mess is gonna like somehow like in some magical way work out.
You are an hallucinogenic optimist.
I didn't see that coming. Like, oh my God, what an awesome move. But right now, it doesn't look good. Right. But like, I try to tell myself that's like looking over the shoulder of a painter and being like, that doesn't look like me. And he's like, shut up, I'm not done yet. I mean, I hope.
Right.
But if you just take a snapshot, it doesn't look so good.
Right. The painting's still a bit messy. Well, one thing I know you're not in a position to talk about is what you're doing next, and but maybe we can talk about AI and certain areas that you think are interesting or novel or like what's giving you goosebumps right now?
Yeah. So I started working with a friend of mine on something. It was very vague at the beginning. It was how can we help people live more meaningful, like more purposeful lives, like live your life on purpose instead of, because even me, for so long with Twitter and everything else, I would just wake up and look at my Google Calendar. I was like, I guess that's what I have to do. I don't even know who that guy is, but I gotta meet with him. And I don't want to do that, but I guess I'm doing it. And it's like I was just being swept along with whatever and I wasn't even living my own life. Right. We have 4,000 weeks to live. Right. And we're and we're invited to the game of life. There's many, many other souls that weren't. Right. And so do I really want to just do what my calendar says all the time? Don't I want to do something on purpose? So, so we started thinking what can we do? What kind of thing can we do to help people with that? And we started thinking of ways to do it, and then we thought, okay, these ways are really good, but it's going to take forever. And so we had a friend who's a real AI genius, and he was in semi-retirement. But we said, "You see what we're doing here? Could we use AI to generate millions of these things?" And he was like, "I think we could." So that, it was really fascinating. We started like working on ways to generate these things that I can't really talk about it yet, but and that really was fascinating because it was working. And then we got, and it was working, but it wasn't so great. But then we were like, well, what if we do this, and what if we do that, and what if we work on this and the other thing, and they just started getting better and better. And then we were like, oh my God, like this plus obviously people in the loop starts to become really good, and then it becomes basically AI becomes a tool for scaling what people can do in a massive way. And then it becomes this tool for like universally helping people live, a better sort of internal life, which is like, I always try to do something like that, and
right.
this is a more potent version, and so it's not really, I wouldn't call it an AI company, but AI is like one leg of the stool, you know. And it's just fascinating. It's really. We always talk about, we meet together and we're like, I was just asking my friend GPT about, like, it's really fun.
Yeah. Well, great. Listen, thank you, my friend, for coming out and making time.
Of course.
Really appreciate it. And I hope you have some time to meet every single person in this room. And but thank you very much.
No,
Please,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.